We are live, and welcome everybody to the Truth Proof live stream. Paul, welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Les. Yeah, and as I say every week, it soon comes round, and it's a cold one tonight, but I'm really looking forward to this guest. I love boots on the ground researchers, and this is what we've got. This guy's going to share his experiences with you. And yeah, how are you, Les?
Yeah, not too bad. I've done a little bit of test filming for some car shots today. So, yeah, all work in progress for our next film, Paul. So good.
Excellent.
Good.
Well, you know, hard work's paid off because we've had a bit of success up at Bempton this week. Myself and Peter, as it happened. I mean, there's been a few of us.
Yeah, I did notice
various nights. It's just screen grabs that I've put on, you know, frame grabs, but we've got moving footage of these things that are just appearing and disappearing. So that's good. We'll be up there, no doubt, later in the week, or, well, we can't get much later, can we? But Friday. So, yeah, all good. And, yeah, really looking forward to it. And I see there's a few people in chat.
Yeah, is anybody on your stream tonight, Paul? Well, I can see quite a lot of names, actually.
We've got MK54, Fred Flintstone, Stargazer Eternal, Steve Tees, Gabla, I think I pronounced that right. Minnie Moose, it's great to see Minnie Moose always. Dragon Rebirth, I know who that is. Diane Farrell, hi Diane. Shane Roberts, I spoke to Shane earlier today, funnily enough. Richie White, and then Andy Decodes is in. Alex Thompson. Alex spends time on cliff tops with us, Les. You know, boats on the Revenant, you know, great friend. So all good. Jojo, Mag Sue. I hate this because we've got to stop saying names eventually, and they keep coming up. So apologies, Disabled Welshman. Apologies if we don't get your name in. Simon Riley, it's happening again. Steph. And my daughter Jess doing moderating tonight. Thanks, Jess. And has she got a spanner there at side of her name? I don't see one. So I think that I might have got that wrong, but is Jess able to do the moderating tonight? And Dave K. So that might be worth noting, Les.
Yeah, I'll check. I'll check in a few seconds. See what's happening.
Yeah.
And thanks for everybody for being in the stream tonight. And if you have any questions, please, for Paul and his guest, please put them in caps, and we'll get them fired across at an appropriate time. In the meantime, I'll be off screen, and we'll bring our guest on for tonight.
There we go. Hi, Darrell. How good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you. I appreciate the honor of being here.
Honours all ours, honestly. Just boots on the ground. You've sort of walked the walk, and just a brief description for our listeners. And you describe yourself as an old town, an old country boy from the state of Tennessee. And I would add to that, experiencer turned researcher of the cryptid phenomena. Am I right?
That's pretty much right. You know, I got started in this actually in 1992 when I had my first experience. But yeah, it got me into it. My first experience was in Cannon County, Tennessee, on my grandfather's farm. And,
so before we jump into that, and I know our listeners are going to really enjoy listening to this account, but just give us a little bit of a background on Darrell and what you're about and what you've done, because you know we've got time and it'd be good to
sure,
get
no problem.
I've
been in this for over about 31 years now, going on 32 as far as researching. After my first experience, I grew up in Tennessee, lived in the hills and the hollows there all my life, and basically I was a mayor there where I lived for a number of years, and involved in some other stuff. I spent about 26 years in all of that, and just so happened my best friend was Martin Groves, and still is, about 42 years. And I research now with Martin Groves and my other best friend, Martin Nunley. And recently, our new partner has been Mr. Ron Moorhead, who's a very close friend. And got another buddy named Billy Howell that I started off with years ago, and we still get together occasionally. But we mainly research now, just us three, and sometimes Ron can't be there, but we always research together at least once or twice a month. Stay 2 or 3 nights, or sometimes longer, in the woods of basically the LBL, which is called the Land Between the Lakes, that's in Tennessee and Kentucky. It's about 270 thousand square miles, so it's a large area. Well known for the dogman creature there. It's called the Beast of the LBL. Before that, I spent most of my time in doing nothing but forest people or Bigfoot research, and there is a difference between those creatures, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure, and there's nobody better placed to share those differences with us tonight than yourself, because I mean, just we like to pride ourselves. It's like multi-phenomena research and streams that we run, but I love the cryptid type phenomena. You know, to be honest, Darrell, if somebody had told me, and I've said this many times, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, that I'd been looking into this subject in as much depth as what I'm doing, I wouldn't have laughed at them, but I wouldn't have really embraced it. But after receiving so many reports, it can't be denied. So, and the names that you've dropped to some of our listeners will know tonight, like such as Ron Moorhead, Martin Groves. It really is kind of, and Josh Turner. I know you're friends with Josh. It's like the cream of the crop when it comes to cryptid research. Not just research, but it's actual experiences, isn't it? That's what separates it, I think. So,
yeah, I think you're right. That's true. You know, those people are just happen to be very close to me, and we have a real sense of loyalty with each other and trust, and it's hard to find that type relationship with people you research with, and
yeah,
I've been blessed enough to have them as very close friends, and I call us experiencers more than anything, but
yeah.
I mean, I've experienced a lot, and surely before anybody thinks so, I don't claim to be an expert in anything because I'm not, but I can only speak of what I've encountered and what I've experienced myself, and we've experienced ourselves, my team. And that's basically what I go from, but my own occurrences. But
I couldn't have put it better. But and everybody in this chat now, or a lot of people, will have heard me say, "I'm not an expert." You know, we've just got to say how we feel it and what we've seen and experienced. Before we jump to that first sighting, what about family members prior to that? Had they spoken about any of this to you?
you know, my granddad was, after I had my first sighting, my grandmother, when I was a little boy, she had spoke of, I didn't realize what she was speaking of at that age, but my grandmother on my dad's side she had a lot of American Indian in her, and she was very spiritual. And she spoke of a lot of creatures in the forest, and not basically keyed in on one or call one a Bigfoot or anything, but she spoke of a lot of things were out there. And she always told me when I was a kid, me and my siblings, my brothers or my whatever, and cousins, to get in the house at dark because the boogeyman would get you. So that was, you know, she always told us that. So
how serious did you take those kind of suggestions back then? Did you think there were a bit more truth to them, or did that sort of ring home after your experience?
Well, knowing my grandmother like I did, I believed her, but I really didn't take into account what I thought what the boogeyman was. But you know, we were all a little frightened on it. My grandma would come out and say, "It's dark. Y'all need to get in the house. You know, the boogeyman will get you." And everybody would just look at each other, a little frightened, and we'd all run in the house, and we didn't go back out. So yeah, you have to take your grandparents serious for a little bit. Some couple of my cousins will laugh about it. They didn't believe it, but I did.
And to give us the geography, then, were you surrounded by forest, woodland?
Well, where my grandparents lived was very rural. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. It's mainly farmland with lots of woods and forest in between. And when I say lots, I mean it's a lot of woods and hollows and hills and mountains there. And you know, and I'd heard things as a kid there. You know, I hunted there all my life. But I never went in quite as far as I went that particular day. And that's really what, I never seen anything out of the normal, just regular animals. But
So I know now we're just about to jump into this first sighting. But before we do, people, anyone listening, please put your questions to Darrell in block capitals, and we'll get to some of those questions in next 30 to 45 minutes. So walk us into that first encounter stroke sighting stroke experience then, please, Darrell.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, my granddad at this time, this actual incident happened on November the 6th of 1992. And my granddad had a large farm. He had cows on it. And basically and he had goats, and he also had mules and horses. But me and three of my friends by the name of Cody, Scott, and Jason would go up to his place every year. And he lived about 90 miles from where I lived. And we would take my camper. I had a camper I pulled behind my truck. And we would take it up there, and we'd park it next to my grandfather's barn, and we'd plug it in, and we'd stay there and camp the whole week of what we call black powder season, or muzzleloader, some people call it here. It's black powder. You only have one shot, and they have a week here in Tennessee where you have either sex, that'd be a male deer or a female deer, but you only take one, and it's with a single shot black powder rifle. You use the ramrod to pack it. And we've been going up there for, at that time, 5 or 6 years, and we'd set up camp. We'd have a good time. We'd stay the whole week, and we'd get there the day before, which we got there on the 5th. This particular year, set up and grilled out and had a good time, and then, of course, went into the camper and slept and got up ready for hunting the first day of opening day. And this particular year, like I said, we'd been going up there for quite a while, and my granddad at that time was 92 years old, and pretty sure he was 92. He may have been 90. I can't remember for sure, but anyway, he was older, but he was in fantastic shape. You would never guess his age. And I'd ask him, I said, I want to get a trophy deer this year. Where would you suggest I go? Because we killed deer every year we went there. We all had different hunting areas, and we weren't close to each other. So he said, well, if I was you, and my granddad always called me boy. He never called me by my name the whole time that I lived with him, and was till the day he died. He called me boy. I was very close to him and my grandmother. And he said, I'd go to that, pointed out behind his back porch. I was standing on his back porch, and he said, I would go, if I were you, to that, you see that third hill over there? And I said, yes. And he said, I would go to that third hill, go to the bottom of it, and there's an old grist mill there. He said, you've been there when you were younger by gravel road back in there. He said, that's my old home place. And there's a part of an old mill to the left there, what's left of it, and the old farmhouse, what's left of it. You'll probably be able to see the roof and the chimney. And when you get over that third hill, you'll go down to the bottom. There's a creek there, and you'll know you're in the right spot. And I said, sounds good to me. So I headed out. I had what was called a climbing stand. We do a lot of deer hunting in the South and Tennessee. And a climbing stand is kind of like a backpack, but it's a deer stand that you can put around a tree and climb up the tree. And I put that on my back, and I headed out to that third hill. And you go back behind my grandfather's house, and you go through a gate, a small gate, and go through about a 200-yard wide sage field. Sage grass is what we call it here. It's kind of a grass that grows in the winter when the green grass is gone. And that is about 200 yards from that entrance to that to a wood line that has a barbed wire fence. And you climb over that barbed wire fence, and you just start going. And I'd hunted this area all my life, but not that far in. So I walked. It was about a 45-minute walk. I went up the first hill, and down it and up to the second hill, crossed it. And these hills, when I'm talking about hills, they're like 45-degree angle. They're really steep. And by the time I got over the top of the third hill, I walked down to the bottom and I seen the creek he was talking about. And I walked around to the left and found a tree there on the side of the hillside that looked like a good one to put my stand on. So you take the stand and you take a wing nut out of it and you put it around the tree, and then you have a climber that goes under it. You put your feet in, and I put both of them around the tree, and I climbed up in this tree about 25 foot up, and I had a little small foldable saw, and I sawed a few limbs off, and I made a spot where I could hang my supplies for the next day. And then I came back down and went down and walked across the creek. This creek's about 10 or 12 foot wide right there. It's not a real wide creek there, but it's about 1 foot to 2 foot of water in it that runs all year round. It gets a lot wider on down. And I went across the other bank to the top of the bank on the creek, and on the top of that bank, there's a game trail where deer and everything walk through there regularly. This is pretty deep in the woods. There's a clearing there in the woods. And I looked to the left, and I seen what was left of my grandfather's old home place. You could see the tin roof laying on the ground, and there was a part of a chimney to the left sticking up. And you could see part of the old mill there, what was left of it, some real large rocks where they had a grist mill in the water.
Grinding.
And I walked across and looked around, and I found a couple of scrapes, and a scrape and a rub is where a buck deer will rub his antlers on a tree. And you want to find that. And I had what was called a drag rag, and I put it on my boot. And it's like an elastic strap on a regular rag, and you put deer scent on it. And when you go in the woods, it covers up your scent going in. And when I got across the creek there, I found an oak tree to the right, and it had a limb sticking way out. And it was probably about 8 foot off the ground. I'm 6'5", and I took my hand and jumped up and grabbed it, and I hung that drag rag on the end of it and let it go. And it was up there high where it would kind of cover that area with that scent, with the wind blowing down that. This is a hollow at the bottom of the creek. And so I got that done, crossed the creek and climbed over the hills and went on back to my grandfather's place and went on out to the camper where my buddies were. They'd already been to their stand. We had some stands built in the trees that we had used there, and a couple of them were using those that they had built prior years. And one of them, I believe Jason, had a climbing stand that he decided to hunt a different area. And we spent, we had a good time, grilled out, and just like a regular camping trip. And I went up to the house and I told my granddad, I said, when you get up in the morning, would you come down and knock on the camper and wake me up and so I can head out that way? And he said, sure, I'll be down there. So went to bed that night, and about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, my granddad come and knocked on the side of the camper and said, boy, time to get up. And I got up and got my gun and my fanny pack, which I carried around me, that had my powder horn and some extra Hornady lead bullets and some firing caps in it. And I had some lunch, and I headed that way and got through my grandfather's backyard to the gate, and I opened the gate, went through it across that sage field. Like I said, it was about 200 yards wide to the wood line. And I climbed over the barbed wire fence there. It was about 7 foot tall. The fence itself was probably about 6, and the 2 strings of wire on top of it would make it about 7. And climbed over it and started going up that real steep first hill, and I'd gotten about halfway up, and I heard something loudly to my left, and it sounded like it was walking over to the left of me. And I shined my flashlight over there, and I didn't see anything. And I walked a little further, and I heard it again, and I shined my flashlight again, and I got a little alarmed. I said, well, I hope somebody's not hunting in here, because it sounded like a person walking, and the leaves were off the tree this time of year, and it made a crunching noise when it walked. And I didn't see it. I shined the light over there several times, so a little startled, thinking, well, I hope nobody's in here. I know my granddad wouldn't let anybody come in here and hunt.
Did it sound like it were on 2 legs, Darrell?
It sounded like it was bipedal. It sounded like a person.
Right. Okay.
And
Sorry to cut
that's
you off,
what kind of alarmed me because I couldn't imagine it. I knew my buddies weren't in there. They were hunting in 3 different hollows, probably a half a mile from me, and not nearly as deep as I was in. And so I went on up that hill. I didn't hear it again. I crossed it, got down to the second hill, and there was an old barbed wire fence there you could jump across. There hadn't been any cattle in there in years. Got over the second hill, and I was coming down the last hill toward the creek, and as I was coming down, I heard the same thing again, but it was up on the hill that I'd just come down, the top of that third hill to my left, and I heard it walk, and it stopped, and I again shined the flashlight up in that area, and didn't see anything, and I heard it walking. I stopped again, and it sounded like it was walking to my far away from me on my left side. I got still a little startled. I thought, I was thinking, could there be a horse or a cow in here? But it didn't sound like that. It sounded like a person walking. And when I'd walk, it would walk, and when I stopped, it would stop. So I made it on down to the bottom of that hollow to the creek. And I wasn't very familiar with that area because I hadn't been in there. And I had the flashlight, and I was walking around the edge of that hill, the very bottom of that hill, and the creek was to the right. And then I found my stand, and I quickly got in my stand. I was a little nervous, thinking, what is this in here walking around? And you get in that stand, and you put your feet in the climber, and it has a blade on it that digs into the tree. And then you sit down in the seat, which also has a blade, and you just work your way up the tree, and you lean back to make the blade dig into the tree where you won't fall. And I got up to where I wanted to be. I was about 25 feet off the ground, but I'm on a 45-degree angle. This hill's so steep, so the tree's sticking straight up off the angle. I'm almost kind of looking over the creek because I'm straight up. And I got up there and got set, and I put my safety strap around and tied it on the limb behind me, and I hung my fanny pack on the limb I'd cut off to the left, and I had a pair of binoculars I hung there with it, and I hung my lunch on the limb behind me, and I pushed back in the stand and made it dig into the tree real tight, and I felt pretty comfortable. It wasn't moving. It was pretty stable. And you have a little bar in front of you, and it comes to about right below your neck. And what it does, when you pull it down, it forms a little bar around you, and it has a camo thing that falls out over your feet. Keeps you real concealed, or if you're moving it, you can't see you. And I always wore blackout under my eyes, the blackout stuff that keeps the glare out of your eyes when the sun comes up. And I was set, just waiting for action, and my gun was loaded. I had a rope tied to it, and I pulled it up from the ground, and I put it in front of me, leaning against that bar. And I was ready to hunt. And I don't remember exactly what time that was. It was it was a little over an hour walk because I'd stopped a couple times. And that was probably 6:30 or so in the morning by the time I got in the tree and set up.
It started to get light by then. Started to get light by then, had it, Darrell?
Well, it didn't actually get light till probably around 7, but it was real super quiet that morning. I couldn't hear anything moving around, and it was very dark. There wasn't a full moon. And I was just sitting there waiting for the sun to come up, and I waited, and everything was fine. And then around close to daylight, it was probably about 7:15.
And were you still aware of the bipedal footsteps? Were they still in the back of your mind, or had that passed?
Oh yeah, that definitely was on my mind. That was the biggest reason I got in my stand and got up as quick as I could, because I didn't know what it was, and I was leaning toward a person, but I couldn't think who that would be. But that was on my mind, and I was listening very close in the dark. I didn't hear it anymore, and when the sun started coming up, right in front of me. It was a real foggy morning. The creek had fog coming out across the top of it, and the clearing across was even foggy, and you couldn't actually see the clearing. But I knew the clearing was there. And about that time, it was getting a little light enough where you could see. I started hearing the regular creatures, squirrels and everything else, birds in the woods. And I was pretty set and ready to go. And it was probably about 7:40, 7:45. I could see real well then. The fog had lifted. There was just barely a little fog left. I could see the clearing well. I could see the drag rag hanging in the tree. I could actually see the scrape on a tree over there that I'd seen before, a rub where a deer had rubbed on it. And I looked to the left, and there was a huge cane thicket. And when I say cane, it's what grows here. It's like tall cane. It's green, and it grows 12 to 15 foot tall, and it was all down the left side of that creek bank. And I couldn't see how far it went from where I was sitting, but it went as far as I could see. And I was sitting there, and I looked to my left, something caught out of the corner of my eye, and I seen a deer come out somewhere to the left of me and around that cane. And it came out, and it walked through the creek, and it went up the bank, and it walked on that game trail. It was coming from my left, and it was walking right in front of me to my right, to the right in front where I could see it. And I wasn't very far from the deer. I was up high, and I was kind of looking over on it.
But you're after this trophy buck, so this is a doe, is it, that's come out? Or?
That's correct. It was a female big doe.
You're right. Okay.
Right after that, two other ones came out, and they would follow the same action that the big female doe did. They came up on the bank, and they were following her. They were probably her yearlings. They weren't really young, but they were still small.
Yeah.
And she walked over, and she was just milling around in the leaves, and there was a real big crop of acorns that year, and deer are really good to eat acorns, and that's what they were doing. They were kicking around in the leaves in that clearing, and they were eating acorns. And I watched them for a pretty good while, and they kind of turned. The female kind of turned to the left and came back in front of me, and she was looking over toward the cane thicket. And I thought, well, there's a buck about to come out of there. And that was on my mind. And the two younger deer, one was to the right of her, and it was looking toward the cane thicket, and one was kind of behind her to the left. And they were all three just looking over in that area. They weren't froze. They were just looking over there like something was over there. I couldn't see what it was from where I was sitting. And they watched it for a little bit, and then the big doe, the leader of the smaller ones, she stuck her nose up real high, like she was trying to smell something. And I was thinking, I hope they're not smelling me. And but it wasn't. She stuck her nose up, and then she made a real loud blowing noise. And when deer make a real loud blowing noise, it sounds almost like somebody sneezing, but it's a lot louder than that. It's like they blow air out of their nostril real loud.
Is that distress?
But really, that was probably what it was. She was probably trying to get movement from whatever was in there. And then she was still looking in that area, turned her head back to it. She took her front right leg and raised her hoof up and pawed down like 2 or 3 times on the ground, like she was trying to get something over in there to move. And I've been around enough deer, I've seen them do that. And she just all of a sudden froze, and she was looking right toward that direction. Her ears were straight up, and she was just completely focused on something over there. And the other 2 deer were doing the same thing. And I was thinking, well, any minute there's going to be a large male buck deer come out with a large rack over somewhere around that cane thicket. And I was real still. I was just waiting for it to come out. And Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the big deer turned to the right and ran right back across in front of me, as fast as she could run. I mean, she was running like somebody had shot at her, and the other two following her. And I looked to the right. I watched them till they went on off to where I couldn't see them on that game trail off into the woods. And then I focused to the left. So I said, well, there's a big buck about to come out of here. And I'm looking over in that area real calmly, just looking, thinking, waiting on this deer to come out. And I looked in the green, that big cane, and all of a sudden I could see the very back of that cane moving. And it was swaying like 5 or 6 at one time. Something was trying to get through that cane.
Would it be difficult to walk through this cane? You know,
there's no way a person could walk through it. It was just too close to each other. It was real thick, but I could hear it breaking some cane as it was going through there, and I could see the tops of it swaying. And I watched it sway, and I watched it get closer to the front, and I watched it get real close, and I thought, well, it's about to step out. I said, this must be a huge deer, because I don't know how it's getting through there. And I couldn't see the exact area, but I could just see the tops of the cane moving, and it was almost to the front of it. And I had my hand on my gun there in front of me, and I was looking right in that area to my left. It wasn't but maybe 60, 70 feet to my left where this was happening. And then all of a sudden, this creature steps out. And now I've never seen anything like that. And it stepped out, and I could see it standing there right at the edge of the cane. And it just takes one leap and completely jumps the creek, which is about 10 or 12 foot roughly there. And it lands on the game trail on the other side of the bank on top of the creek. And when I seen that, I thought, what am I looking at here? I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't know what it was, first of all. I'd never seen anything like that. And it walks down the game trail, and it stops directly straight ahead of me. And I'm up 25 feet straight up on a 45-degree angle. I'm basically looking over on top of it. It's only maybe 50 feet from me. And I'm looking at this thing, and it's stopped, and it's staring right at me. And
so it definitely knew you were there then?
Oh, it knew exactly where I was at. I had no doubt that's what I had heard going in that morning.
And I'm probably asking you something you can't answer, but do you think it knew as it's coming through the cane? Did you get that feeling it had that intent, or when do you think it knew that you were there?
I think that it probably watched me climb up the tree in my stand.
Right.
But, it was over in there, and it was real thick. I couldn't have seen it. Plus, it was dark at that particular time. But it stops. It looks right in front of me, and I was just absolutely in a panic. I didn't know what I was looking at, first of all, and I was just shocked. I thought, well, I don't know what to do. And I was really almost in shock. It was that frightening when I seen this thing, and it was big. And then it looks at me, and it shows me its teeth. It grits its teeth and shows me its teeth, and I can see them really well. They were just like normal teeth. They weren't fangs or anything like that. They were square teeth, but they're, of course, bigger than a human. But it's just gritting its teeth, looking at me with the most evil look that I've ever seen. And one side of his mouth was kind of contortioned. The right side of its mouth was kind of contortion sideways. It's kind of hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but
yeah.
And it's just looking at me with these eyes staring at me, and it had the meanest look, like it was really mad that I was there. And I'm just in a panic. I don't really know what to do. I reached down and I pulled the trigger back, the hammer back on my 50 caliber black powder rifle. And I said, well, I don't know, do I shoot this thing? If I shoot it and one bullet doesn't take it down, I'm not going to have time to reload because it'll be over here by the time I get started. And, you know, I didn't know where to shoot it or not. I didn't do it. But I definitely knew that it didn't want me there. And so then it walks just a little bit to my right. It reaches up and it grabs that drag rag I'd hung in the tree, and it pulls it down and smells of it. And then it reaches up and just pulls the whole limb out of the tree. I mean, I'm talking about, now this wasn't a massive limb. It was probably about 3 or 4 inches where the diameter went into the actual tree. But it ripped the
oak tree.
Oak tree. It ripped the whole limb out and just threw it on the ground. And then it walked right back where it was at to begin with and started staring at me again. And then it lets out a growl. And I've never heard a growl like that since. And I've been around quite a few of these creatures. I've never heard that particular growl again.
Did you feel it inside? Did you feel your internal organs reverberate or?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I was trying to breathe.
Right.
It was the most frightening thing I've ever been through because I don't scare very easy. I've been in the woods with, you know, bears, everything you can think of, and I don't get scared. But this was like something I'd never seen. And first of all, I didn't even know what it was. But I had an idea that it was a Bigfoot type creature because I'd heard of them, but I'd never seen one. I thought all of them lived out in the western United States if they existed, in, you know, California or Oregon or British Columbia, Canada, that area, maybe Washington State. But that's where most of the sightings had been that I'd heard about. But it looks at me. It's still staring at me. I was trying to make my mind up. Should I shoot it or should I just jump and run? Because there was no way. It takes 15 to 25 minutes to get down the tree in that stand. It's not a quick descent. And it's still staring at me after this growl. And I'm just absolutely scared to death, to be honest with you. I didn't know what to do. And then it's looking at me so evil, and it lets out a scream like I've never heard since. And I've listened to numerous screams over the years. People have sent me and on different shows and everything else. I've never heard one like that. It was like a long growl type scream that turned into a long screech at the end. And it was mad. It did not want me in there. And I thought, and my first thought when it screamed like that, I could just feel it vibrating through my body, and it echoed all down that hollow. Real loud echo, and it's standing there. I thought, well, this is it. This thing's fixing to cross the creek, grab me out of this tree, and whatever it's going to do with me, it's going to do. And by that point, I had my hand on my rifle. I thought, if it comes across the creek, I'm firing.
Just Darrell, just to draw back to the canes, 10 to 15 foot tall. How big was this compared to those canes? So you got kind of an height comparison there, and you're 6'5", you said.
Right.
How tall are we looking at?
Well, I based it by the tree limb that it broke.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. The drag, the scent drag.
Right. And I'm real close to, you know, that was probably about 8 foot off the ground. And because I could almost reach to the limb when I put it up there, but I had to just jump up just enough to grab the end of it. And it was probably about 8 foot or maybe a few inches more. And, you know, after it screamed, you know, it sat there and stared at me a minute, and I can't even explain how mad it looked. It looked like it wanted to kill me. It was just really mad that I was there, and I was having a hard enough time trying to breathe. I was just frozen. I was frozen, and after it done that, it turned and walked, but turned around and walked straight back into the woods. It stopped one time, it turned its head, and it looked at me, and it kept walking. I watched it walk out into the woods until it went out of sight. And I wasn't even thinking about climbing down that stand. I lowered that bar in front of me, and I jumped out of the top of that stand,
Yeah.
25 or so foot up. I had my gun above my head. I left everything in the tree, my fanny pack, everything I had up there. And when I hit the ground, I was in those dried leaves, and it's so steep, that 45 roughly degree angle. I slid all the way down into the creek.
Yeah.
And when I stopped in the water was right about my knees, and I had my gun above my head. I looked back, I didn't see it. I took off and went up the bank of the creek, and I ran as fast as I could around the same way I came in. And there was a little ravine there that was a little shallower, wasn't quite as steep in that hillside, and I went up that. And I ran as fast as I could, and I got over the top of that first hill, and I'm looking back constantly thinking this thing's coming.
Absolutely terrifying. We can't imagine it, but we can. Does that make sense? You know,
I mean, you know, it's every time I've told this story hundreds of times over the years on different shows, and you know, every time I tell it, I feel the same thing I felt. I go back to it, and I remember. You know, back then we had these old Iron Man watches. They were called Timex Iron Man watches. And most of the hunters, including myself, had one. And when I seen a deer come out, it had a stopwatch on it. You could push the button and it would register what time the game come out of that area. And we kept up with that so we'd know what time to be in there the next time. And the actual creature came out at 8:23 in the morning. That's when my stopwatch, I had pushed the button as it stepped out, thinking it was a deer. And so it was later than usual, I would think, for that type creature. But I kept running anyway. And by the time I'd made it down the first hill, I got just a little ways up the second hill, and I looked back, and there it is on top of the hill I just came down, standing up there next to a tree that's watching me. Now, it may have been a different creature. It probably was, but it looked like the same type. And when I seen that, the adrenaline kicked in, and I was running faster than I probably ever ran. And by the time I got to the top of the second hill, I was still looking back. It was still standing there. It wasn't running after me. And I got down that second hill, and I'm running as fast as I can. And by the time I get up to the third hill and to the top of it, I'm completely out of breath. I don't even know how I was running because I couldn't catch my breath. But I kept looking back. I didn't see it. I got over the top to the third hill, and I'm running down this hill. And these hills are probably a good 300, 400 feet from the top to the bottom. And I'm running as fast as I can down the third hill. I remember looking back several times, didn't see it. And I'm almost to the barbed wire fence. So I have to climb over to get to the sage field, to get to my grandfather's backyard. And I decided to jump that barbed wire fence. And I wasn't going to try to climb it. And I was running fast enough. I cleared the fence. The barbed wire caught the bottom of my pants and ripped them all the way up past my knee and cut a huge gash out of the side of my leg. And I just kept running. And when I got to that sage, I looked back. I didn't see it. And I was running all the way across that. It's about 200 yards to the gate. Kept looking back, didn't see it. And I got to the gate, and I opened the gate and went inside and put the gate back, locked it, and looked, didn't see it. And then I'm only a short distance to my grandfather's old farmhouse. It's an old wood farmhouse that had a tin roof overhang on the back. And I went up on the back porch and looked back, didn't see it. And I opened the screen door and opened the door and went into the house and reached out and locked the screen door with one of those little hooks you put on it, and shut the door and locked it. And I'm looking out the glass in the window. I don't see this thing. I'm completely out of breath. And I go to the right. When you come into the back, you're in my grandfather's kitchen. And I went to the back and went to the right. And I go into the front, through the right, into the living area. My grandfather was sitting there on the left in a rocking chair. And Oh, there was a big potbelly stove in the living area over in the far front right corner between there and the center of the living area. And I went over and just sat down on the floor behind it. And I was just sitting there. My granddad he kept saying, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I couldn't talk. I was so out of breath. And I was trying to get my breath. And he goes, "You look like you've seen a ghost." And I said, "I just couldn't talk. It took me a good 4 or 5 minutes to be able to say anything. I was breathing so hard trying to get my breath." And then I got up and run and looked out the windows and looked out the back door again to make sure this thing wasn't coming. And I finally caught my breath, and I came in and sat back down over there. And he said I was white, like I was scared to death. And he said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know, Granddad. I just seen a monster." And he said, "A monster?" I said, "Yeah, I've never seen anything like this. I was hunting where you told me, and this big creature came out, and it was the meanest, ugliest thing I've ever seen, and it was really upset that I was in his area." He goes, "What'd it look like?" And I told him what it looked like. He goes, "Oh, you seen a wood booger?" I said, "A wood booger?" He said, "Yeah, they around here." I said, "Well, why do you tell me there's stuff like that around here?" He said, "Well, you've been hunting here, camping in the barn and the woods all your life, and I didn't want you to be scared of anything around here." He said, "I've seen 4 of them in my lifetime." He said, "I'll be working in the field. I'll look up and want to be standing next to the fence just watching me work." He said, "I hear them a lot more, but I've only seen 4 in my lifetime." He said, "With the old folks," he called the old folks, his family, his parents and aunts and uncles. He said, "They call them the wood booger." And I said, "Well, this thing was the meanest thing I ever seen. It wanted to kill me." He said, "Oh, no, you just in his territory. You made him mad. You probably interrupted his hunt." And I said, "Well, you never told me about this." And he said, "I told you why I didn't tell you." He said, "They ain't going to hurt you." He said, "He just scared you out of his area." I said, "Well, he did a good job at that." And he took it like it wasn't that big a deal. To me, it was life changing. I was just scared, still scared to death. And
do you know, Darrell? There's so many things I want to ask you about that, but I have a feeling Les has appeared because we've got some questions. But I don't want to cut you short. If we've,
you're fine. I got time. If y'all got time, go ahead.
Yeah. I think we've just about covered that one anyway. And seriously, you've took us back there. That were absolutely fabulous. Thank you. Go on, Les.
Yeah, and thanks for all the questions what have come in so far. Thanks, Jess, for sending those over for me. Ginge197 is saying, "Great show tonight. She looks forward to Thursday's, Paul, and you've got a great guest on tonight."
He's fabulous.
Thank you very much.
Not to do anything. How good is that?
And Ginger sent a monetary donation tonight. Thanks for that, Ginge. I'll put a question on the. I presume it's a female. And Ginge197, what does Darrell think the Dogman are? Are they flesh and blood, supernatural, or interdimensional?
Well, I think I heard Dogman, but this wasn't a Dogman. This was a Bigfoot.
So let's throw it to the Bigfoot then, as well as the Dogman. Yeah,
I don't mind answering both of them, but I think they're, from my personal experience, and this is only my experience, I don't have any scientific proof of any of it, and I'm not a real believer in all the scientific proof anyway, because they don't really tell the truth about all of it.
Well, where are the scientists, Darrell? Where are they? Are they in the forests with you, actually?
No, they're
not. They're not, are they?
No. I truly think that I personally believe that there's a lot of different type of these creatures. I've personally seen what I believe to be 3 different type over my years of experiences and encounters. But I went and searched. Of course, at this time, I didn't have cell phones or computers. I mean, I never had one of those then. I don't think I got my first cell phone to the probably late 90s, or maybe even, I think it was more like early 2000s when I got one. But I wanted to know what this thing was. My granddad told me, he said, "They won't hurt you, boy." He said, "They come up here in the wintertime and they'll come get chickens out of the chicken house, and they'll leave a little pile of sticks and rocks like they're paying for it. They don't take them all; just take 2 or 3. And the wood booger thing was what stayed on my mind. So I actually went to the library, the local library where I lived, and I looked through lots of books trying to find pictures of these creatures, and I did find a book that said 10 different type of Bigfoot. And lo and behold, the second one in the book was type 2, number 2, type 2, wood booger. And it said below it, mostly seen in the southern United States. And I was that's where I was at that time. And I looked at it, and it was identical to what I'd seen, except for the eyes. The eyes in this picture were red. This creature didn't have red eyes. It had black eyes with...
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask you, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. What color were its eyes? So they were black. Yeah.
They were black like a human's, but the eyes were a lot bigger, and the actual white around the eye was more of a yellow color than white. Okay. But it was a solid dark black creature, had no white on it. The face looked like leather, like old black leather. The hair was not under the eye. It was mainly leather looking all the way down to right about the nose, and then it had hair, and it had hair on top of the head. And it wasn't cone shaped. It was more of a round head like a human, but it was a lot bigger. It was, after I looked at those pictures, I actually went back again several times and looked in that book and to make sure that was what I'd seen. And it was definitely the one I'd seen. And so somebody had seen it sometime in the past to relate it as a wood booger. So,
yeah. We could literally go down a rabbit hole with this question because there's so many things. It's supernatural or interdimensional, but so not going to disregard your question. We'll come back to some of that, Ginge. But is there any more questions?
I don't mind answering that for. I do not think the Bigfoot is supernatural. I think it has supernatural abilities. Yeah. I know it does. I've witnessed it. They have special, some type of way they read you. When you go into the woods, they know what your thoughts are and they know what your intentions are. There's no doubt about that. I've been around too many since then. And there is a difference. I do think they have very special abilities. Dogmen, I've seen 2. One of them was flesh and blood, no doubt. Looked like a massive German Shepherd. The second one I seen with Martin Groves in October of 22. He and I were together. And that one was like something I've never seen. And I couldn't tell you if that was flesh and blood or not because I've never seen anything like that. And,
no. Okay, I'll put the next...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I'll put the next question on the screen, which is from Enigma. Are Bigfoots true shapeshifters? Can they present themselves as deer or other species?
I'm not sure about that question. I don't know if they're capable of doing that, but I don't think so.
No, just to elaborate on that a little bit, Darrell.
Okay.
What do you think? What do you think then? When people report these things almost floating rather than running, have you heard that before? I never saw its legs move. I know that we've got somebody in chat tonight who's seen one and saw it move, and he said it arrived. I didn't see it walking. It arrived almost like a torch beam passing down a wall, but it was still there.
I do think they have a high. I think they have a higher vibration of energy than we do. I think they're capable of moving in a different way than we do. I do think that some of the orbs in the forest are possibly them turning into a different energy form and moving. I've actually seen some orbs with a Bigfoot face in the orb.
Not a trick question from me then, and I'm sorry because I know Les has got some questions, but wouldn't that make it slightly supernatural, slightly more paranormal than flesh and blood, Darrell?
Well, I think they have a way of turning their flesh and blood into a higher energy, is my point with that. I think they are a flesh and blood type creature. I think we all have powers that we don't know we have.
Yeah, no, great point.
We
Thank
don't
you.
practice them. We don't use them. You know, our ancestors had, my ancestors, I have some Native American in my ancestors, and they think that we're able to do a lot of things that we no longer do because, you know, we're spending time now watching TV or the cell phone or whatever. Back in the day when there wasn't any entertainment, people had a lot of different things they did. And I think they did have some possible stronger reaction to the way we see it now. I think they had more capabilities because they used them and practiced them. But
brilliant.
you know, the
Bigfoot.
I've seen a Bigfoot. You know, Ron Moorhead is one of my closest friends, and you know, he wrote a book on quantum, and I actually have it right here. It's called Quantum Bigfoot, and I've read that book 3 times, and I still catch myself occasionally picking it up and reading a certain passage in there. And I think it's the best breakdown of anything I've ever heard. Do I think Bigfoot can cloak or disappear as what you're talking about, supernatural? Yeah, I think they can. Have I ever seen one? No. I did see one walk behind a tree, a large tree, not very far from me, and it didn't come out anywhere. When it went behind the tree, it just vanished. So I don't know how it did that, but I do know these creatures are flesh and blood, though. Maybe I don't think all of them have that supernatural or whatever you may want to call it. The ability.
Darrell, I think you're putting the point across absolutely brilliant the way that you see it, and I love it, honestly.
Well, thank you.
This is good for me tonight. This is entertainment for me as well as our listeners. Seriously, I'm enjoying this. So more questions, please, Les.
Yeah. Thanks for answering these tonight, Darrell. From Bob, does Darrell think that some Sasquatch witnesses are chosen?
Sure. No doubt. I know I'm chosen. I have no doubt I'm chosen. I don't know how I'm chosen, but I am. Because I go into the woods, they find me. You don't ever find Bigfoot or the forest people, and there is a difference. But you don't ever find them. They find you. You don't see them unless they want you to see them. And I do believe you have to have a good heart to see them. If you're out there for the reason to kill one, harm one, you know, Bigfoot is a Chayitanka is what my people call him, which means big, large elder of the forest, the keeper. And they do that. They believe in taking care of the land and not cutting down all the trees and turning it into modern civilization. They're very loyal to their beliefs in the forest, and they believe people should be the same way. But unfortunately, you know, most humans are not like that. You know, I have a lot of people that I know that have contacted me over the years. They have one intention. They want to go with me and shoot one of them. And I say, no. First of all, if somebody thinks they can go in the woods and shoot a Bigfoot and think they can make it out alive, good luck. Because there's not one, there's many. If there's one there, they have watchers. Most of the time, the juveniles are the watchers, and they'll belly crawl. And they'll get behind a log or a stump, and they'll be watching you. They know when you get out of the vehicle, they know you're there.
Can we just expand on that a little bit then? So you think you were chosen, or they chose you because of the persona and what you're about? Do you think then after a person's had an experience, they're going to have more? They're more open to having them.
If you have a good experience, yes. Yeah, I think that. I really do. And I wouldn't have thought that if it hadn't happened that way with me.
No.
But, you know, my second encounter, I was so terrified. I had nightmares for months after what I'd seen, my first experience. And I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get it off my mind. It was just changed my life completely.
well, hopefully, Darrell, we'll jump into that. But if we can do a few more questions, because
Sure, go ahead.
I know we've not got time for all of this tonight, because I was going to ask you your mental state after the first one, but we're going to jump to second encounter after a few more questions.
Yeah.
Go on, Les.
So thanks for that, Darrell. And kind of leads us on to this question from Space Cow. Darrell, do you take protection when you go searching? If so, what do you use? Is it prayer, offerings, etc.?
If I've been into an area where there's a family of the forest people are the ones who make the large X's. If you see trees in the woods, and I'm talking about massive trees, they don't have to be massive, but a lot of times they are. They're broken at the bottom. They're still attached to the tree, and they form an X in the middle of the forest. And they'll also lay dead trees on the trails or the game trails. Bigfoot always are close to the game trail. They're always close to a water source. And the reason why they are is because they got to feed just like we do. And their main diet is, of course, in my area, it's mainly the white-tailed deer. And there's wild hogs, too, that they'll feed on. But the forest people make the X's. They're different than the Bigfoot. My opinion, the Bigfoot, Sasquatch are the same creature. Some parts of my people call them the hairy man, but some parts of the country they call them Sasquatch, Bigfoot. Everybody refers to all of them as Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but they're not all alike. The forest people are completely different. They look nothing like the first one that I've seen. They're all friendly. They're not looking to harm you unless you harm them or try to harm them and their family. And they're very skeptical of you, and they're not trusting. But they know they have a way somehow to know you're not there to harm them. Now, I have friends who mind speak with them regularly. I don't. I never have. I'm not saying I can't. I do think they have tried to mind speak with me before. And I wouldn't allow them to mind speak after my first occurrence because all these creatures aren't friendly. The forest people are. They're all friendly. The Sasquatch and the Bigfoot, a large number of those, I think personally will kill you. I think they would probably have you on the menu, some of them. They're just like people. There's bad and good in everything. And not all of them are good. You know, I've had some terrible things, occurrences and encounters myself. I had two that attacked my farm in 2020, and they had me scared to death for about 2.5 months, and they were trying to kill me. I don't know why, but they were. But that's the only bad occurrence I've had besides my first experience, and I don't really think that one now was trying to kill me. My first wood booger experience, the only wood booger I've ever seen. If it wanted to kill me, it could have.
Yeah.
It didn't kill me, and I do relate back to what my grandfather said. Now it wanted to scare me to death and get me out of its area, and it done a good job of it. So,
and ripped your trousers to boot as well.
So not so much a question, this one, rather a statement. Jeremiah Abbott. Darrell has definitely painted a picture, and not only can I picture exactly what he's saying, but I can almost feel it. Being a previous hunter, I know exactly what he's talking about. Nice one.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. It's fabulous. You've made my job and Les's job easy. Seriously, Darrell, it's wonderful listening to these accounts. I'm happy with the questions, but I'm looking forward to hearing number 2. But go on, Les.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you want to swap. Because a lot of people are mentioning Dogman actually, but
I think we're going to go
there. I've been around Dogman. Martin Groves and Martin Only and I just actually this last March, we were in an area that nobody had ever stayed in, and and we were taken there by a person that knew the area very well, and several people had tried to stay there before, but they were
Are we gonna jump into this account now then, Les, and leave the questions and let Darrell?
Sure, I'll leave it to you
whatever
guys.
you want to do.
Yeah, this is good, Darrell. Please, providing you're happy, I'm good to go. Yeah. Let's hear
All
it.
right.
So,
I think I probably need to just quickly address my second encounter because that's what changed my life as much as the
okay,
first
okay.
one. But my second encounter happened in 1999. It was 7 years.
Darrell, don't be quick then. Because let's hear it in its entirety. If we don't get to the dog
That's
man,
fine.
we
If you
can
want
listen
to,
to you again.
whatever you'd
Because
like me to do. I don't want to leave
yeah,
anybody's question out about the dog
no, but I
man.
can see that you've got a method and where you want to go with this. So let's listen to the second one, please.
only because my second occurrence is what made me realize that these creatures aren't evil. Not all of them. I didn't. First of all, from 1992 till 1999, I never went in the woods hunting again. I was too scared to go in the woods. And I did go back to my grandfather's farm the next year. And I took my friends. They went hunting. I didn't go. I told them didn't want to hunt anymore. I lost interest in it. Because I'd already mentioned to them before, have you ever seen anything here like a Bigfoot? And they said, did you have too much to drink? I said, no. And I just left it at that.
Just to draw back to the first sighting then, when it screamed, when it made that sound, did your friends hear it?
Oh, no, they were way away from me.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
But, it was a large area that we hunted. They were up closer to my grandfather's house to the right, probably half a mile to a mile away. But,
right. Sorry to cut in then. So the second encounter.
Well, my point is, I was, as bad as I say it, I was pretty scared to death to go in the woods. I never went back to that spot. I still haven't been back to it. Now, my grandfather's been passed for a number of years now, but he doesn't even own that farm anymore. Somebody else does. But I've never been back there. I guess my stand's still there, my binoculars, whatever is hanging in the tree, but I've never been back and never wanted to go back. But my point was I didn't hunt anymore. I was quite frankly afraid to go in the woods. So I would hunt. When I did hunt, I would hunt in my truck. I would pull into the field and I would sit in my truck and just watch the wood line, and I wouldn't get out and go into the woods. But I did do some hunting like that, but never in the woods again. But long story short, 1999, I was there's an area about 100 miles from where that incident happened, my first encounter. About 30 miles from where I lived at that time and still live when I'm home and in Tennessee. I had a place that I fished a lot, and I still fished. I wasn't scared to go fishing, but it's on the Cumberland River that runs through Tennessee and actually feeds into the land between the lakes. It turns into Lake Barkley before it feeds into that. But it's between Nashville and the other side of Ashland City, Tennessee, which is Cheatham County. And I had friends that had showed me a spot to fish there years before, and nobody ever went to this spot because it was real hard to get to, and the public didn't even know how to get there. But you pulled in behind an old water treatment, like sewer treatment plant there, and there was a big gate parking area behind it. People worked there, and a friend of mine's uncle worked there, and we started pulling in behind it because there was a place down the river that they had found to fish, and it was a real good spot to fish. Nobody went there, and we caught a lot of fish there. So I pulled in behind this plant. I was by myself, and I'd fished there quite a few times, but it'd been quite a few years since I'd been there. And I pulled in behind there, and I knew the man that worked there, which was my friend's uncle. And he said, yeah, sure, park down at the gate down there in the back behind the building and go through the gate. There was a game trail that went through that gate, and it went through about 200-yard wooded area, and then it got to a clearing in the woods, and it's right on the riverbank. And I would go back there and fish, park my vehicle, carry my equipment back there, and I carried a 5-gallon bucket with my equipment in it, which was my tackle box and stringer, and I carried my rods in my hand, and I'd go back there to this particular spot and fish. And this particular time, It was probably around February. It was still cold. It snowed and rained quite a bit, but it was a pretty good warm day, and there was a real good area there that we fished for a fish here we call crappie or crappie. And I went back there to fish, and I was there's a sandbar that goes out from the bank there and goes out to about middle ways in the river. And you have to, when you catch a fish on the bank, you have to walk down that sandbar. If you don't, you get your line hung up in the roots that are sticking out of the bank. So I'd caught a couple fish, and I had a bucket. I had probably had 4 or 5 dozen minnows in a styrofoam bucket, and it was sitting next to my 5-gallon bucket that I sat on, that I carried my equipment in. I'd sat on it, and I walked down to that sandbar to reel the fish in, and I'd taken the fish off and put it on a stringer, which keeps them alive in the water till you leave, and walk back up on the bank. It's probably 30 yards from the end of the sandbar to the top of the bank where the tree was, and went and sat down on the bucket, reached over to get my minnow bucket, and my minnow bucket was gone. And there's nobody out there. Now, this is pretty out in the country too, pretty far remote, and nobody knew this spot but me and 2 of my friends, Dwayne and Donnie, and they weren't with me. And their uncle worked there. I think it was their uncle, maybe their cousin. But anyway, I looked around. I couldn't figure out what happened to my minnow bucket. And I got up and walked around, and to the left of me is this game trail that I'm sitting on that runs down, and there's this real thick stuff there. It's called kudzu, we call it here. It's like big, huge ivy, and it's real thick, and it goes all down the riverbank there. There's a game trail that goes through it, but you have to get down almost on your knees to get through there. And it was a clearing where I was sitting, but so I looked everywhere. I could not find my minnow, but I couldn't figure out what had happened to it. It was very strange. So after I looked a while, I didn't have any minnows. So I went down to turn the fish loose and come back up and mystified what happened to my minnow bucket. And I went on to my vehicle, and I left and came back about a week later and had another minnow bucket and was going to fish again, and went back and set up my poles and pretty much the same procedure, and set the minnow bucket next to me. And this particular day, it had been raining and storming a little bit. It was a little windy, and it was cloudy. It was kind of real wet back there, but you couldn't get out on the sandbar because the water was up higher by all the rain. So I'm fishing, and I go down to the edge of the bank where those roots are and reel a fish in to keep it from getting tangled in the tree roots sticking out of that bank, and come back, sit down, minnow bucket's gone again. And I'm like, somebody's in here. Somebody is in here, either living in these woods or somewhere.
Do you think it's in that thick vegetation that you've just described?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, maybe something. I even kind of went in there a little bit. I couldn't see my minnow bucket, but it was kind of a windy, rainy day. And I looked around thinking maybe the wind had blown it off. There was a little creek there to the right that run into the river next to the sandbar. And I didn't see my minnow bucket anywhere because these styrofoam buckets don't sink, they float. And I couldn't figure out what had happened with the minnow bucket. It was very strange. I had one thing for sure. Somebody was in there, and they were taking my minnow bucket. So I packed my stuff up and went on back to my truck again and left. And I think it was it might have been 2 weeks later. I went back and I carried my minnow bucket. But this time I got another minnow bucket with 4 or 5 dozen minnows in it. May have been 4 dozen. I don't remember exactly how many. But this time, before I got there, I tied a rope, a small thin rope, onto the metal handle to the minnow bucket. And I tied the end of the rope to that tree I was sitting behind. And you could walk off with a minnow bucket probably 15 feet because the rope was that long. But I thought, well, if somebody's going to get my minnow bucket this time, at least I'm going to catch them before they get it off the tree. And I even brought my I had a 410 single shot shotgun I brought with me that day, and it was leaning against the tree because I didn't know what this person was doing, stealing my minnow bucket, because somebody had to get it. So
Yeah.
I'm sitting there fishing, pretty much the same type thing, except the sandbar was back out of the water that day. I'd caught 2 or 3 fish. I was having a pretty good day. And I walked out to the sandbar and got a fish and come back and put it on the stringer, which was hanging on the side of that bank in the water. And went back up, and I looked as I'm walking up the bank toward the 5-gallon bucket that I sat on. And I noticed my minnow bucket was down toward the kudzu on that game trail, and the rope was stretched tight from the tree down into that kudzu on the game trail. And I went, okay, whoever's getting my minnow bucket is in this kudzu. And I went to the tree, I got my shotgun, and I walked down into that area and was looking down in there, and it was real low. I'm tall, and you have to almost bend down to the ground to get through there into that game trail area. And I did that. I got down practically on my knees, and I went back in there probably 5-10 yards, and over to the right I look, and there's a minnow bucket laying there in the kudzu. And over to my left, a little further up, the minnow bucket was laying there. And I knew then, well, there's my 2 minnow buckets that I lost. And I went over and pushed the weeds out and got both of them. And I went back and set them next to the tree where my bucket was. And then I went over to get my minnow bucket that was stretched tight with the rope, and the water had all spilt out of it. It had a styrofoam top that was attached to the little rope, and it was off, and all the water had been spilt. There was only a little water in it, and the strange thing, there was only 1 minnow. There was 1 minnow in the bucket. And I looked down and thought, what kind of person steals 4 or 5 dozen minnows and leaves what's going on here? So I reached down to pick up my bucket, and right next to my bucket where the water had sloshed over on this game trail, it's real muddy there anyway, all the way up to the cars. That game trail's muddy. You can see your foot tracks in it when you're walking. Right next to the bucket was a footprint. And it wasn't a large footprint. It looked like, maybe an 8 or 10 inch footprint. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, who's walking around down here in the cold weather? It was like 40 degrees that day, is walking around the river in the wintertime with barefooted. That was my first thought. And I got to looking at it, and it didn't quite look like a human foot. It was a little bit wider, but it wasn't big. So I got my minnow bucket. I went back to the tree and set the minnow bucket next to me. And I left my poles out that I had out, but I wasn't fishing anymore. I was sitting there to catch whatever was in there. And I sat there for probably a couple of hours, and I would hear something moving in that kudzu. You could hear something moving around in there. So I knew somebody was in there. And I've been sitting there probably about 2 hours, and I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and I looked to my left, which I wasn't very far from where I'm talking about. It might have been 10 yards to where this was happening at. And I seen a creature. It was looking at me like this. It was bent over. It had its hand hanging on the side, had its hand around a tree, and all these vines were in front of it, but it had its head out looking at me. And I looked at it and I thought, is that a person? And I looked again and I thought, oh no, it's another one of these creatures. So I immediately went into a panic. I done run into these things again. And it didn't look anything like the one I'd seen before, but it was a little one. It wasn't a big one. Turned out to be a female. She was about 5.5 foot tall. and she was just down. And every time I'd look, she'd go back in. When I'd look again, she'd go back in. And I had my shotgun, and I thought, well, I guess I need to leave here because these creatures are here at the fishing spot. So I sat there a while trying to get my nerve up to wait, and I decided to leave. So I got my gear and headed out and went back to my truck and left. And it stayed in my mind all that day. It was just, I couldn't get it off my mind that these creatures were there. And it was one of those things where I was trying to make my mind up whether I wanted to go back or I didn't want to go back. I didn't know if I wanted to see them or not see them. And I fought with that for about a week or so, and I decided to go back. And I went back and carried everything just like I was fishing once again, and put my poles out, but I didn't put any bait on them. I just set them in a bucket there. Still had my shotgun with me next to the tree.
Did you still take the little 410 this time? You didn't take anything bigger?
No, I just carried that little 410. It was just a 410 shotgun, single shot. First gun I'd ever gotten.
Just to draw back, and I'm absolutely certain that most people in chat will know what the minnow bucket is for, but this is your bait bucket, isn't it, with the minnows, yeah?
Correct. Yeah.
Just in case anybody didn't know in chat.
It's a 1 gallon styrofoam bucket. It's made out of styrofoam. It has a little styrofoam lid on it, and the lid has a little rope that keeps it tied to the bucket, and it has a little minnow net tied to it, and you dip your minnows out with it to put on your hook to fish with.
Yeah. So, I'm absolutely certain most people would know, but for anybody that didn't, because you know, so you went back again, you put the lines out, but with no bait on them.
Right. My main purpose was one thing: to find out, about these creatures. So I've been sitting there a long time. I don't remember how long it was. I didn't think they were going to come out. It was longer than I thought. I'm guessing probably 3 or 4 hours. And then I heard something moving in there. And it was something walking in that kudzu. I could hear it walking in there. And I'm looking straight ahead like I'm fishing. And I catch out of my eye again. I look up, and it's that one that looked like the same one. It turned out it was the same one, but I wasn't sure. And it was doing the same thing. It was looking at me again, just looking at me, watching me. And of course, it didn't come out to get the minnow bucket or anything, but it watched me, and it kept watching me. And it was probably another hour, another one came. And it was behind this one, and it was a small one too, about the same size. And it was looking. Both of them were looking at me. And I thought, well, there's a whole family of these things in there. I said, they haven't tried to, then I started feeling kind of calm. I thought, well, they haven't tried to harm me. And I know there's a bigger one if there's little ones are here. So I kind of hung around, and it got pretty close to dark, and I wasn't going to be in there in the dark with those creatures. And I got my gear and headed out, but I seen 2, and they didn't try to harm me. And I went back, and I started going down there regularly. And I didn't go down with any fishing gear. I did not carry my shotgun. I felt like they weren't trying to hurt me. And I went in there and just sat down on my bucket and started talking to them. I said, if you're here, would you come out? And of course, they didn't answer me or come out. But I sat there for a while, and here come the little one again. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and thought it was a her. And finally, she just sat down next to the trail and just stared at me. And I was staring at her. And I said, I tried to communicate. I told them I was here fishing. I don't mean to bother your area, just normal talk. I didn't know how intelligent these creatures were, or if they were what they were, really. But anyway, that went on most of that day. And I did see the second one. It came out, same type thing I had before. And then a big one came out. And that's when I got nervous. But it wasn't a full grown one. It was probably about 6.5, 7 foot tall, but it was behind the other two. And it was down low, crouched down. It was probably watching over those two. And it looked out at me, and it looked at me differently. It looked at me like this, real good, and it was looking out around the other two. And I was trying to talk to him. I was saying, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to harm you. Please don't harm me. And not knowing if they knew what I was saying or not, but they didn't seem aggressive, and they didn't bother me or charge me. So I didn't know anything about gifting. I never heard of gifting at that time. Didn't know what it was. I didn't know anybody that had seen these creatures but me. So I started going down every day, every other day, and I would go and stay at least a couple hours, and I would sit, and sometimes they would come and look at me, and sometimes they wouldn't. And the more frequent I came, the more I started seeing them. They got comfortable with me. They had a trust about me. And I started... Go ahead.
And no, I know you've said like you've not given away the location, which the exact location. Does it sometimes worry you then, Darrell, if you actually gave the exact location that some people... And you also said that you won't see them unless they want you to see them. But does it worry you that if you gave the exact location, some people might want to go with the wrong intention, wanting to harm these things? Because if we take what you're saying today, and I'm absolutely riveted to what you've shared with us, I really am. We've got an unidentified... You're identifying it. People like Ron Moorhead's identifying it. Martin Groves. The people we've spoken to for Wolflands leave us in no doubt that these things are out there and these things are real. But there's a species out there that's unidentified, having these extra abilities that go over and above normal animals, but they're out there. Does it worry you that myself included, I'm not labeling you here, that we might be exposing the locations of where these things are?
Well, nobody knew where this area was at. And I didn't tell anybody where it was at. I did take a friend down there about a year later, and he got so scared he ran back to the truck and he wouldn't come back. But
did he experience anything?
Oh, I experienced a lot with those. They become those creatures become my friends.
Did your friend experience anything when you took him out there?
Oh, he's seen one of them.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
when he seen one, he thought, I told him, I said, there's some creatures that living down on the bank, and he was a really close friend of mine. His name was Darrel, and I said, you want to go with me down there? I said, I don't think they'll mind you coming. You want to go with me? And then I explained to him about the whole thing, and he was like looking at me like, really? I mean, he knew I was telling the truth, but he just couldn't believe what he was hearing. And he said, yeah, I'll go with you. So this was like a year and a half into this, but and when he seen one, he looked at me and I looked up and he was running toward the truck. And he never wanted to go back again. And he never told anybody that I know of, but I never took anybody down there but him. But these creatures, I started bringing these creatures food. And it turned into a real good relationship. Now, these creatures are what I call the forest people. There was X's everywhere down there, big X's, trees on the trail. I didn't realize what it was at that time. I'd seen these X's for a long time, but I didn't realize that was their marker.
Right,
so I'd walked around them for years at different locations and never known that. But they taught me a lot about themselves. And when I started gifting them, I didn't gift them food at first. I brought them toys to see if they would play with them or whatever. I left them several small balls. I left them several marbles, just anything I could think of they might want to look at. And some of them they would take, some of them they wouldn't. They would leave them. There was a whole family in there. I never seen over 3 of them in over a 3-year period. I could hear the bigger ones in there. I could hear them making noises, but they never showed me themselves.
I'm kind of
Go ahead.
mindful of the fact that I cut across you, didn't I, as you were talking about the 5.5 to 6 foot one that were behind the females. So I don't want to close you down on that account,
you're
because
fine.
I'm pretty sure Les is going to be back in next few minutes with some questions, and we haven't got to yours and Martin's encounter. We might not even get to it. So I'm hoping you might say you'll come back for another hour, even at some point, and share that
Sure.
one if we don't get to it.
I'll be glad to come back with you.
That'll be wonderful. So go on. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, so just, I closed you down. You were telling us about the one that was stood behind the females, and I asked you a few questions. How did that pan out? What happened after that?
Well, this went on for about over 3.5 years. I was going down there every day or every other day, whether it be morning or evening. I would go down to see them. They knew me. When I started coming into the area, it's about a 200-yard, maybe not quite 200 yards from the gate where I parked back to where they're at. And when I was walking in, I'd start just talking loudly. Hey, I'm here. Come to see you today. I'd just talk normally like that to them, and I could hear them. They knew I was coming. They knew my voice, and I was becoming safe to them. They knew I wasn't there to harm them, and they weren't trying to harm me. And eventually it got into me bringing them food. I brought them just about everything you could think of, and I found out what they did like, what they didn't like. Their favorite food was cantaloupe. Their favorite fruit was cantaloupe. They loved cantaloupe. They didn't like bananas. They would not eat them at all. They wouldn't eat oranges. There's numerous things I took them they wouldn't eat. And I actually made a little small box out of plywood and 2x4s, and I put it in the tree that I sat next to, and I nailed it up there where I could put my food gifts up there and my regular gifts up there, where other animals or creatures wouldn't bother them. And
who did you share this with then, Darrell? Did you, at that time, over that 3-year period, did you speak to anyone? I know you took your friend in, but did you speak to many people? Where I'm going with this is, obviously,
no, I didn't tell people about it, and the biggest reason I didn't tell anybody is because nobody would have believed me. I already found out that from my first experience, because I told numerous people about it, and everybody said, "Oh man, you seen a bear." Nobody believed that I seen what I seen, and at that point, I didn't care what anybody thought, because I knew what I'd seen, and I didn't care what the negative people believed in. But I found, there's a lot of things about these creatures too. You just don't take people in without their permission. They don't know these people you're bringing in. I actually had taken my girlfriend to see them, and they didn't like it very much. But she got scared to death too and wanted to leave. But the bigger one was probably about 6.5, 7 foot tall. It was hard to tell because he was squatted down in there. But the younger female, I found out she was a female later. She got fairly close to me. She might have been 10, 12 feet from me. She would sit down on the game trail and just look at me and watch me, and I'd watch her, and I tried to communicate with them. I told them my name.
How did this resemble? How close did this resemble to a big primate, orangutan or a gorilla?
Oh, nothing like that. This looked more like they looked more like the Patty type that you've seen in the Patterson Gimlin film. It was more that type looking one. Very similar to that, but of course smaller, and because it was a younger one. But over the time I spent in there, over 3 years, she grew. She got bigger. But the whole entire clan for some reason never showed me themselves. But I actually went in there and camped out with them. I slept next to the tree. They were over in there, and I could hear them. This went on for a long time. They made me a gift. They made me a half-gallon milk carton, a milk carton. It's cardboard. A half-gallon milk carton that I guess had been in the river. At one time it was red and white, but it faded out to pink and white from the sun. And they stuck sticks through all four sides. All the four. It's a square. A milk carton is, and with, I guess you know what a milk carton is there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have them there or not, but they stuck sticks through all four. You know, 2 sticks through this side and 2 sticks out that side. And when they came out, they formed an X. When they came out of the carton on all 4 sides. And they had a little weaving like looking vine around it. And they started putting those X's next to the box, and that's how I realized that was their marker. That was their marker. The X is what they go by. And
so not to cut not to cut across, but I am cutting across because I'm desperately disappointed we've not got to Ron, but I'm going to go to Les and see if we good for more questions if Les has got any, and I'm sure he will have. And so if Les can come in a moment, because I'm mindful of the time here, Darrell. And are you still okay for questions?
Oh, I'm fine. I got plenty of time. I don't have to be anywhere.
Wow, we'll have to devote another 3 hours, guys. The way this talk's going tonight. But thank you, Darrell, for answering some of these questions that our live streamers have brought to me. Richard White is asking, are these creatures ever sighted in large numbers, Darrell?
They're always, what I've found out from my research, there's usually always at least 5 to 7 per family, or some people call them clan. And sometimes you do get to see all of them, not all together. They don't walk out and just wave at you, but you'll see one over here and one over there. They don't ever come out and just, in my experience, they don't come out and just make themselves wide open like that, the whole family together. The ones on the river, the most, though, I only seen 3 there, and it was the same 3 the whole time I was there. I did hear the other ones. I heard some loud grunts, some loud whoops, sticks. It sounded like sticks banging against each other, rocks clacking. They were back in that kudzu, and I'm sure they were watching over that family. I don't know why they never let me see them, but they didn't. I wish I had have seen them, but there was a whole lot that went on there in that time frame. You know, the big thing that really, when I really realized how intelligent they were, I'd taken them food or toys all the time. And every time I went, I didn't take them a gift, but I would take it pretty regular. I'd take something. And they would make me things. But I went into a dime store, which is a small market, and they have small gifts for birthdays and stuff. And I always went there. It's called Elmore's, and I'd buy cheaper stuff there to take them. And one time I took them a little package of whistles, like little kids' whistles. They were plastic, red and white whistles. They had a little black string attached to them where you could put it around your neck and you could blow it. They were just little plastic whistles. And that was probably about the second year I was in. And I took them those, and I didn't know if they knew how to use them or not, but when I come in, I'd say, I'm here, I'm coming in, and it wouldn't be long when I sat down. They'd come out and look at me, and I still was trying to communicate with them. I told them every time, my name is Darrell. I said, do you know who? I even spoke some native language to see if I could get some type of reaction. And they looked at me like, they didn't say anything, but looked at me. But that particular time, I hung those whistles up when I was leaving on branches all around that kudzu. I think there was either 8 or 10 in a pack. And I said, I'll see y'all later. I'm leaving. And I'd go on out, and I'd go back to my vehicle. Well, it was a day or so later when I was down there going in, and like I always do, I announced to them, "I'm here. Hope y'all are doing okay today." And I could hear them running around in that cat zoo, and that particular day, it was absolutely amazing. It was probably one of the most astonishing things I've ever had in my career because I got about halfway there to the area I was in, and I heard those whistles. They were blowing whistles way back in there, past the cat zoo, across the river. I heard a whistle. These creatures were blowing whistles, uh, let me know that they knew I was there. And that was when I really realized that these creatures are intelligent. They're not.
There's a definitely an intelligence from what you're describing that takes them over and above a normal animal. But then there's also the fact that you're taking toys in, almost childlike. And this is not to belittle what they are, but you're almost childlike what they're doing. So is it intelligence as we'd understand it, or is it some kind of natural ability that they've got, do you think?
I wish I could answer that. I wish I could sit down and talk to them and get a lot of answers. I tried my best to communicate with them the whole time I was there. And, the biggest thing that I got out of that, and it's probably not important to the audience, but, for the first time in my life, I realized that I wasn't scared anymore.
Right.
These were different. They weren't like the first one. They welcomed me to their home. And it took intelligence, first of all, to put sticks through a milk carton and form an X on four sides and put a vine around it. And, it got better. The more I went and the more they knew me, it got better.
Yeah.
It was getting close, in my opinion, that something really good to happen. And it finally did. But there was a lot of things, but there was very rarely a time I went in there that I didn't try to get some kind of communication, whether it was a whoop or a grunt or whatever they could do from them. And they looked at me kindly, not like they were upset at me. They were glad to see me. I could tell that by their expression when I came in. But
how long ago is this, Darrell?
This went on from about 1999 well, it went on for almost 3.5 years. So it was a good time frame.
Is there a part of you that wants to go back?
Oh, I've already been back. I would have still been going there. That wasn't the problem. I didn't quit seeing them.
No.
They were my friends, and I knew that. They trusted me. But
okay. Right.
I went in. What exactly happened was, and quite frankly, I looked for them for years and I never could find them again. But I had to work longer than I had expected. And for the first time ever, it was about 3 weeks or longer, but maybe a month before I could get back down there. And the whole time on my mind, I was worried that I wasn't there to see them. But it was just part of life. I was working and I had been tied up, and I still wanted to get down there and see them, but I was working long hours for that short time. And as soon as I got a break, I went down there to see them. And when I walked in there, that back gate area, where I parked my vehicle, the fence had been removed right there, and somebody had took backhoes and track hose and leveled that whole. They leveled the whole area out back there, and all the trees was gone, and most of the kazoo was gone, and even the spot we fished was level, and there was pink stobs sticking up with little ribbons. I mean, stobs with little pink ribbons on them, like they were going to build something.
Right
there. So I don't know if it was that plant adding on or what it was, but they just had leveled it off. I mean, it was.
Well, it's kind of closure for that one then.
Well, I went back in there, even further back in, and I came out that day, and a man caught me, and he said, "What are you doing back here?" And I said, "Well, I've had permission to fish back here for years, and I said, "Are they building something here?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." I mean, he didn't want to tell me, but
No.
I said, "Well, I need to. Can I walk back in there?" And he said, "No, you don't need to be back there."
So
And
that closed it down for you then, really, Darrell. So
well, I found another way to get in there. There were some train tracks not far from there, and I parked over next to them and walked down these train tracks, which walked past that area, but I could still see the area to the right, and the train tracks stopped and went a different direction down there. And I went off down that bank where the kudzu was, and it was behind the area that I'd been in. I looked for tracks,
nothing.
walked way back in there. I yelled for them, even got a boat and went on the other side of the river and walked around the bank looking for tracks and yelling for them. And I never heard or seen them again. I don't know what happened to them.
Okay, right. I'm mindful. We've got about 15 minutes, Darrell, and I really wanted to hear Land Between the Lakes because that was the meat and potatoes of the absolute. Everybody likes a scary story, but we're not going to get to it. But we're going to get to some more questions if that's okay.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Go on,
Okay, so Nickname is asking where can I see the book? I think if you're talking about the book which is behind Darrell on the shelf behind him,
Darrell.
It's the Quantum
Ron
Bigfoot.
Moorhead's The Quantum Bigfoot, yeah?
Yeah, I was just saying that. Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
Ron Moorhead.
Ron Moorhead, yeah, the Quantum
Ron
Bigfoot.
Moorhead has
I've dropped the link in the tonight's stream. So if you want to check that one out, that's the link is from Amazon.
This is
so, yeah.
the Dogman Encounter. This is Martin Groves' newest book. The whole second chapter is about he and I with the Dogman we seen in LBL in October of 22.
Okay, so
Small Town Monsters just had us out there in October, and we did a documentary with them about that creature. So. Or what was the question again? I'm sorry, or do I need to answer?
It's just about the book. But here's a question: North Carolina Cryptid and Paranormal Projects (NCCPP). Darrell, glad I can make your interview. You should explain some of the weird stuff found in LBL while you're hiking and camping with Barton.
But have we got time for him to do that? Just you can touch on it, please, dude. Darrell, if you want to do, but if we can get 2 or 3 questions in, because otherwise,
yeah, sure. The question was, do I hike and camp in the LBL? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, Darrell, glad to make your interview. You should explain some of the weird stuff you found in LBL while you were hiking, or I presume it says you were hiking and camping with Barton.
Yeah, well, Barton, I go there to the LBL with all the time with, well, Martin Groves and I have been there together numerous times, just he and I. But normally it's always me, Martin Groves, and Barton Nunley. Just recently, Ron Moorhead has joined us, and he's been with us, and we plan to go again. But we've done a lot of hiking there and camping there, and we've had a lot of weird stuff happen there. We found large dogman tracks. Last March, we were camping in an area that nobody had ever stayed in, and we had a gentleman take us in there, and he said, "This is the area you need to be if you want the dogman to come around you, but I'd tell you won't ever stay here all night because nobody ever has. They get scared and get out of here." And I don't think there was a large number of people that had been there, but there was quite a few that had tried to stay there. And I said, "Well, we're not going anywhere." And we stayed the whole night. But the first night, that night that we were there, we were grilling out, and Martin Groves, it wasn't even dark yet, and we had a gentleman that come to visit us that took us in there, spotted a small juvenile Bigfoot over straight ahead and looking over a log at us. And we had already set up there, and we had a fire going, and we were cooking, and that was a really crazy night. Right about dark, Martin got real sick, and he thought that he'd been zapped by something because he was really sick. So I tried to get Martin to go, but he said, I'm fine.
Are you talking infrasound when he says that?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Something he felt like had infrasounded him. And Martin has a special way with these dogman creatures, not like anybody I know, but they seem to find him. I don't know how. I don't know why Bigfoot finds me, but they do. But he got sick anyway, and I had to drive him down a good ways to a restroom area there, and he felt like he was going to throw up, and he was real weak. And we came back, and he sat in the truck quite a while, and he was trying to get to feeling better. And Martin and I sitting around the fire a good ways from him next to the woods, and there's huge hills around us, big hills and hollows, and we started hearing a lot of noises, and this was probably about 11 o'clock at night when we started hearing all the dogman howls, and they were real loud howls, and we could hear them coming way off in the distance. And behind us was a real shallow part of the lake there. In the wintertime, they do what's called winter pool, and they'll lower the lake. It's usually 5 or 6 higher in that feet higher deep water in that area, but they lower it. And we could hear something running across through that shallow water. It sounded like several animals running, like a dog, actually, is what it sounded like. And we heard these things coming all around us. And I said, get ready, Barton. They're coming in. And Barton looked at me and he goes, I'm ready. And Barton carries this big, huge sword that he calls Nightmare. And, I thought, well, I don't know if they're going to attack us or not. But Martin's still in the truck and he's laid back in his seat because he's feeling real sick. And I was talking to him, asking if he was okay. And now, I have no service out there whatsoever with my cell phone. I can't get anything out there. And I have a lady that has a real intuitive ability to see things. I know it sounds crazy, but she's really good at that type of thing. And my phone rings out of the middle of nowhere, and we're sitting next to this fire, next to this place nobody's ever stayed or spent the night at. And we're hearing all these howls all around these hilltops and all around us. And this particular lady, I'm sure she wouldn't mind me telling her name. Her name's Beth, and she's in my group. And she goes, I said, how did you call me? My phone won't work. She goes, I don't know. I picked it up and dialed it, and I had no signal there at all. And she called me. She said, you need to get out of there. I said, well, how do you know where I'm even at? She goes, I know where you're at. You need to get out of there. You've got dog men all around you, and you've got a feral man. I said, a feral man? And she said, yes, you've got them all around you. And I said, well, thanks for calling me, Beth, but we're not going anywhere. So I hung up, and these things were getting closer. And Martin got sick again. Felt like he was going to throw up. And I said, you need me to take you right down the road real quick again? He said, yeah, real quick. And I ran him down there. Wasn't very far to this, in the middle of the dark restroom in a national park. And I had the headlights of the vehicle shining on the building, and he's in there for a few minutes. And whatever was in the woods around that was throwing rocks and sticks on top of the restroom. You could hear them bang, 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 hitting the top of it, trying to run us out of there. And I waited on him with a flashlight. He got back, and we went right back. We wasn't very far from where we were at. And we got back and got set up again, and these howls are still going on. And up to the left of me, there's a Bigfoot standing behind a tree. He's peeking around the tree, and he's looking at all three of us. And I kept telling Barton, I said, Bigfoot right there watching us. And I had him on my cell phone in the block. You could see him in it. And we watched him a little bit, and these howls were getting closer, and I was getting kind of nervous. And we try not to carry weapons, but when you're in that type of situation, you better have one. But about that time, they were so close. Martin gets up in the middle of this whole thing when these dog men are coming in, and you could hear them running in the woods, and it was really getting pretty scary. And Martin gets out of the truck, walks right by me and Barton, right next to the fire, and walks into the woods. I said, "Hey, don't go in those woods by yourself. Come back." And he just kept going. Walked right in the middle of the woods. He starts chanting something real loud. I mean, real loud, chanting something real loud. And he comes back, he sits down in the truck and reclines his seat again. I said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "What did you say?" And he didn't say anything. And it got as quiet as you could drop a pin. We didn't hear another dog man the rest of the night. The Bigfoot was gone. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen, how they just completely left. And
so did he tell you then what this chant was, or this whatever it was that seemed to nullify everything?
well, we're close enough friends that he tells me everything. But he went in and recounted a Bible verse.
Right. Okay.
That's all I know.
Yeah.
But it was, these things were close and they were really making noise. That's the first time I've ever been in there and heard that. Like that.
Darrell, with 5 minutes left, have we got time for another question, Les?
Yeah, I'm going to put this one on the screen. I don't know if you can see with this one, Darrell. I'll read this one out. The disabled Welshman is asking, have you heard the Sierra sounds? And if so, do you think it's real Bigfoot talking?
Well,
oh, no doubt. Ron Moorhead is one of my best friends. I've actually got the Sierra sounds right here on CD. But sure, I believe they're real. They've been checked over by practically everybody in the scientific community that knows anything about language or sounds. And, by what I've understood, I don't know how that's registered. I think it's decimal points or something like that. But there's no known human that could make that type of sound. We're not set up, engineered right to make that type noise. It's definitely, I have no doubt that it was some type of Bigfoot around Ron there. Actually, Ron has seen one there, but yeah, I definitely think they're real.
And some of this, not just the sounds, has been identified as a language. Am I right? Yeah. But by linguistic experts, not just by Darrell and Ron, actual people who've listened to this and said that is a language. Obviously, we don't know what they're saying, but
these creatures, the many forest people and Bigfoot, Sasquatch I've been around, they have their own language. I know that for sure. They have their own language. They also know English. They know what it is. They won't act like they do, but they know what it is and they know what words are. They definitely know some of the American native languages. They know what some of those words are. They may know it all. I don't know. Wish I could sit down and have a conversation.
Darrell, I'm cutting across you again. Have we time for one more question, Les?
Yeah, go ahead. You got it.
It'll have to be a quick fire on this one, guys. And the question is quite simply this. Pronunciation all messed up there. Darrell, do you think Bigfoot could be connected to any missing 411 cases? That's a bit quick on this one.
I think there's a very good possibility that, like I said before, that some of these creatures, some of the Sasquatch Bigfoot, not the forest people, but the Sasquatch Bigfoot, could definitely be a part of that. I don't think it's all them. No, I think there's I think there's something we don't know about. I don't know what that is. Now, I've never seen an alien. I've never seen anything like that. I have friends that have, but I think the dog man could possibly be part of that. I think there's probably some other phenomena we don't know about. Now, I've never seen anything myself, and there's lots of people that have seen more than I have. I've seen forest people, Bigfoot. I've seen dog man, and I've seen what I call the plastic man one time. And That was a very strange thing.
That's probably a story for another
You've
time.
left it on. Darrell, would you come back?
Sure, I'd be glad to come back. I enjoyed your show, enjoyed the crowd. Yeah, I'd be glad to share what I know. Like I said, I can only tell you what I've experienced. But
yeah, great crowd in tonight, and I've got to go through these, Paul, before.
Do
thank
that.
Hinge 197 TA, Martin Abbas, and if I've left anybody else, I don't think so. For the donations tonight, and it all goes to helping us bring better streams for you guys. So yes, thank you.
I've got one more thing to say, Les, if possible, before we just close this down. Apart from thank you, Darrell, we're going to do a pre-recorded live stream, possibly next week. It may be the week after, and I'll be doing it with Robbie Williams. So if anybody wants to send any questions, it'll be all lowercase, Paul Sinclair, ILF@gmail.com. And we'll see if we can fit them questions in. I think people in chat and people who are going to listen to this afterwards will know Robbie's interest in UFOs and the unexplained. So we'll be looking forward to that. But over to you, Les. Over to you, Darrell. Thank you.
Yeah, and I gotta thank Darrell, and I gotta thank people who sent the questions in. I'm really, really sorry we couldn't get all the questions out tonight, but Darrell has been such a great guest with some great accounts as well. Darrell, thank you very much. Paul.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate if you would subscribe to my group. It's Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, and subscribe to my best friend Martin Nunley's show in Humanoids. He has a show every Wednesday, and Martin Grove's books, Ron Moorhead's books, and my very close friend Hellbent Holler. They have a fantastic show where they're live in the LBL, Land Between the Lakes, Joe and Jesse Dahl. So I appreciate you having me on. I'm very honored to be here, and I'll be glad to answer any question I could answer, and I hope I did.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. Honestly, it's been a pleasure, Darrell. And from myself, thank you.
At this point, the electrics, the money in for the electric has run out, Darrell. So we've got to end the show. Thanks everybody for joining. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining the stream, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Les. Thank you, Darrell.